All right. Welcome, everybody, to this month's season of the User Dev meeting. We've got a topic on our list today about the balancer. So I'm going to share my screen so we can all see the agenda. And feel free to add your names to the attendees list here. All right. So I'll be talking about the topic for today. So mainly the goal of the discussion today is I want to get some user feedback about a feature that we're planning to add for Umbrella and just understanding different use cases and how we can support it. So the idea is there are two scripts that I know of in the Ceph community that are not officially supported, and they're called upmap-remapped and pgremapper, and they're used for several use cases in terms of getting PGs that are stuck in remapped state out of that state. And I'm looking to understand the use cases in the field. And also the goal the goal is for these scripts to be, since they're not officially supported in the Ceph repository, a lot of people either don't know about them or are not sure if it's safe to use the scripts. Since we found in the community that these scripts are very helpful for a lot of different use cases, we're looking to add official support for these scripts in our repository by adding tautology testing around them. And then the idea also is that the scripts patch certain behavior in the upmap balancer module. So that will be likely a phase 2 in the adding support, where we'll add some of this behavior to the balancer. But right now we're in the research stage where I'm trying to understand all the different use cases that are covered here and how it's used in the community, things like that. Apologies that this error keeps coming up. I keep Xing out of it, but we might just have to deal with it. So also there's a feature ticket here. I'll just share this briefly as well. I won't go through the whole thing, but Dan Vanderster and I came up with this feature ticket to track it. So those who are interested can track it here. But I essentially wrote out the motivation and the proposal. So that's where it's being tracked in the upstream community. So as for use cases in the community, known use cases, I've mostly been looking into the upmap-remapped script so far. And that script is written in Python, so as opposed to pgremapper, which is written in Go. So I'm not sure about how we'll be able to support pgremapper in the repository, if that will be possible. But again, research is still ongoing. But from what I understand about upmap-remapped, a lot of the use cases involve changing crush rules or tunables, adding capacity, like adding hosts or racks, or also draining a host, and that these actions can cause PGs to enter remapped backfilling state and be stuck in that state. And as we have seen, the balancer module does not do anything if the cluster, if all of the PGs are not active plus clean. So these scripts are used to rectify that kind of situation. But first, I'll ask. Yeah, go ahead.
There is another situation where it is useful, namely if there are too many misplaced PGs and the disk, an unrelated disk goes bad, and the problem is that Ceph wastes time dealing with the remapped PG and does not focus on dealing with the degraded PGs. So what I usually do in this situation is to run the upmap-remapped script so that all the backfills are cancelled and Ceph can finally focus on the degraded PGs, and that tremendously accelerates the progress. But in any case, I also want to notify you that for this purpose, the upmap-remapped script is not my preferred tool anymore. Because placement optimizer pi script from the JJ recently gained the equivalent functionality, and we use the JJ balancer. We use the JJ balancer to monitor the recovery and the backfill status. And so it feels natural to use just one script instead of
Okay.
two. So if you allow me to copy paste somewhere, I will show how this output looks like, and actually I can probably copy paste into the pad.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, feel free to
so
paste.
yes, that's the output that I'm talking about.
Okay. So this gives us the state uh, and is it like a dry run of remappings
No.
before
It's
remappings are
this
executed? Oh,
cluster. This cluster currently has indeed three PGs misplaced, and this script shows uh, where those PGs would be moved. Uh, well, this is an erasure coded pool. So where the erasure coding chunks would be moved and what's the progress of the current data movement. Basically, it's in this mode, it's a summarizer for the CFPG query.
hmm. Okay. Okay, so that's good to know. So backing up about the larger scope of it. So now I see, and I was aware of the JJ balancer as well, but I didn't. I wasn't aware that there was overlap with these use cases as well with this script. So what script is most used by at least the people in this call?
So the GJ balancer is the single most used script. So previously I did use, as I said, uh,
Mhm.
the upmap-remapped script. But now that there is a call to placement optimizer, remap, undo, pipe, bash, it is 100% equivalent to the upmap-remapped scripts. So that made the
Okay.
upmap-remapped script obsolete, in my view.
Okay. So they're the overlap is very similar, except the JJ script um, provides more monitoring options. Is that the case?
Well, regarding monitoring, the output that you have in the pad is the only kind of monitoring that is available there.
Okay. Yeah, really, I guess I'm still unclear exactly what the difference is between those two scripts, and so that's what I was getting at. If you can provide more information
Okay,
about that.
if you so the JJ balancer is a script that can either create up maps in various ways or show the current backfills. So the mode where it shows current backfills is on your screen. the mode where it
Right.
undoes but feels okay. I can probably just share the screen. Yeah, I'm customer cluster. I probably shouldn't do that, but oops, no, it's camera. So yeah, it's a Croid cluster. So if I run this with the undo argument, I am not piping that to bash. It will collect the information about the current remap PGs, and then it would generate the commands that would undo those movements. This is exactly what the upmap-remapped script does.
Okay. And then
Then what?
it's yeah. Go,
Then
sorry.
it can also balance the cluster. Unfortunately, I am not exactly sure what exactly the command is. So it is balance, and it has lots of options to control how it balances. So, for example, whether it prioritizes moving data from the fullest to SD, or is it a more balanced, more general, just balance it. It allows to specify how many PGs to move. So if we run it with the default options in the clustering, it will, but it will output up maps. So it outputs up to 10 up maps at once. But if we tell it, for example, to move the data from the fullest to SDs and output not 10, but let's say 100 moves, sorry. We can also increase the verbosity. So it creates up maps, and it shows a summary of the new situation. So how much space it was able to gain due to better balancing, how much space was available, how much space would be available if one applies those up maps. So that's how it works.
Okay.
So obviously, I'm only dry running this because there is no real need to rebalance this cluster.
Okay. Yeah, Frederick, yeah, your hand up.
Yes, thanks for sharing this, Alexander. This is good stuff, interesting. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yes, the tracker that Laura and Dan created, I think is about integrating the idea of remapping the acting sec with the upset, just to get all PGs active clean, like all the different scripts do. Whatever the script, I mean, whatever the logic, I think this is the goal to achieve, also with the time window, and making sure that it does not trigger too many OSD maps. And yes, the idea is to put that logic into the balancer module, manager module, I think. And that's right. So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
whatever the output, whatever the output of those scripts, the idea is just to get the pages active clean as app, so that the balancer then can trigger some remapping with data movement that do not exceed a certain amount of misplaced objects. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I'm trying to narrow down is the scope of what we can do realistically for the umbrella release. Um, so we've as I can see with like the JJ balancer and everything, there might be additional stuff that we may want to add, um, or additional behavior that we want to add, but we want to keep the scope right now focused on the scenario that Frederick just described, and that's in that ticket about aligning the up and acting sets for that particular scenario. So what I'm trying to understand is if it would be most helpful for the community to uh, add initial support for like the upmap-remapped. I'm not hearing anything about the pgremapper script. So is uh, is that just not would it be enough to add support for the upmap-remapped script, and would that be or in the first phase? And I want to emphasize we do want to understand also what kind of behavior this is patching in the upmap balancer, in the manager module balancer, and we also want to patch the behavior there to have people not running scripts all the time. But phase one would be providing support for the script itself. Um, so, what are people's thoughts on adding support for upmap-remapped and pgremapper to accomplish that particular scenario that's described in the ticket?
I don't think it makes sense to add any explicit support for those scripts. Maybe mention them in the documentation, but that's it. In my opinion, those scripts do not need. Well, I am speaking only for upmap-remapped and placement optimizer. I never tried the pgremapper. But those scripts do not need any explicit support from Ceph. And if you want to achieve the same goal, then the functionality of upmap-remapped should be just copied, not calling the script, but implementing the same functionality. It's literally a 30-line script.
Yeah, I think the main idea behind the script is to have the balancer come into play also, not to trigger more balancing and more data movement, but also if there are too many misplaced objects and too much data movement occurring in the cluster, to reduce the number of PGs actually trying to backfill and to move to other OSDs down to target misplaced ratio at max, which is 5% by default, if I'm not mistaken. And so that this removes the contentions and lux that can happen with the PGs going into backfilling with many OSDs backfilling PGs at the same time. And so that would be not just adding more PGs to the balancing, to the backfilling, but also reducing its. But that could be an option. That could be an option for the balancer.
Yes, just a note. Both of those scripts, both upmap-remapped and placement optimizer, do not look at the max misplaced setting at all. They try to reduce the number of misplaced PGs to 0, always. Cancel all backfills, that's all they do.
Yes, for now, the script standalone scripts, but if we would add the logic of upmap-remapped script or pgremapper script or any script inside the manager module, balancer module of the manager, then it can also look for target misplaced ratio and try to lower the number of PGs and remap the PGs down to target misplaced ratio so that there are only 5% object misplaced at a time. You could do that. It would be nice.
I understand. However, the use case, at least for me, is basically to reduce data movement, reduce unnecessary data movement as much as possible. And by doing more interventions, we usually keep the balancer completely disabled. So I would even say that if we are talking about focusing on recovery or on focusing, okay, if we are talking about focusing on recovery, then any extra work that the cluster does on backfills, if it is to or from the same OSDs, it will just slow everything down. So including this as a balancer module would completely ignore the case when the user temporarily wants the balancer not to run.
Well, right. So that would be the idea behind adding the support in the repository. And also, I want to provide some context about just how we do things development wise. But if we were to add the logic directly, because I would be the one implementing this, if I were to add the logic directly to the balancer module, there would be a lot of consideration about, because ideally we would want to have this behavior on by default eventually, but the first phase would be some kind of additional flag maybe that somebody would pass, or something to enable so that you could opt into the behavior. And there would be in the first phase of umbrella, that's what we want eventually, but there needs to be it needs to be done carefully, so that we're not making the balancer worse in any way, and I mean that's why I'm working on researching all of this anyway. And then there are use cases where people are wanting to use the script with the balancer turned off. So that's what I'm trying to understand today. And that's the idea behind adding support for it in the official support for it in the repository as the first phase, so that people feel more empowered to use the script in the first place. And by add support, we would be adding truthology testing around it, and adding test cases in our suites about where target misplace ratio is exceeded, and addressing those use cases exactly. And then we also have Dan Vanderster as the primary um, uh, contributor to this script, and he would be able to submit it as a PR. So, but we have he's a strong contributor in the community already. So that's the idea behind adding the script first and adding testing around it, and then as a phase two, introducing it to the balancer. Long story short, it just needs to be done carefully and in a way that we feel confident about adding that behavior to the balancer.
Well, I think there is still some misunderstanding. Here is my view of the ideal sequence of events. First of all, on stage 0, don't touch the balancer at all. Introduce a new Ceph command, Ceph pg upmap undo, which will, Ceph pg remap undo. That will generate upmaps that would undo all the existing data movement. So that would reset the misplaced to 0. Once this is done, it's up to the user to use it or not. If they don't use it, 0 impact. Once we are confident that we have ported the functionality of the script correctly as a Ceph command, Ceph pg remap undo, we can look at improving the balancer behavior so that when there is too much stuff misplaced, it automatically runs a partial equivalent of this, so that instead of undoing all the remapped, all the misplaced pages, it only undoes them to bring the misplaced ratio below the configured threshold. And then we call it done.
So I'm clear on the undo portion of this. Is that relating to the use case of target misplaced ratio being exceeded, or can you explain that piece?
It is the core functionality of the script. It looks at all misplaced PGs. It looks at PG temps, and it makes the acting and up match by adding up maps. That's all that it does. All I want at stage
Okay,
zero
so
is to
yeah, good.
all I want at stage zero is to have that as a Ceph command, so that I don't have to rely on an external script. No integration with the balancer at all at stage zero.
Okay, and then this undo action is aligning the upsets with the acting sets. It's not removing, because there is PG upmap primary, or no, PG upmap items remove, or remove PG upmap. I forget the exact, but there is a command to remove the mappings, I think individually one at a time. But that's not what you're talking about here, right? That's
Yes,
different.
it's okay. Let me actually show what it does on this cluster. If I haven't done this already, it generates the up maps. It generates the up maps in mass. So if I say remap undo, it will generate the up maps that will align the acting and upsets, or remove up maps if that's what it requires.
Okay. And again, can you describe a scenario that might lead up to using this undo command? A typical
Uh,
scenario for you?
a typical scenario uh, the, if the current backfills hamper the progress of something else, such as dealing with the degraded PGs. Basically, Ceph postpones and postpones and postpones the backfill of certain degraded PGs because it thinks that misplaced PGs are also important. And okay, I would start backfilling with degraded PGs, but no, I can't because that would exceed the OSD max backfills threshold. So okay, let me postpone it. Let me think about it later. And then later, some other PG starts to be backfilling. Then Ceph again thinks, okay, let me try to backfill these degraded PGs. Oh, I can't because of exceeding the OSD max backfills setting. And by canceling all active backfills, uh, we can make sure that Ceph has nothing to do except fixing this degraded PG, which is then done quickly. And then we can rely on the balancer to restore all those backfields.
Okay, yeah, okay. So this is again coming from this is the behavior that upmap-remapped script does as well. in aligning the acting and upsets.
Yes, this is the only thing that it does.
Okay. Okay. I see. And so you described the what's going on in the cluster at the time, but leading up to that, are you adding capacity to your cluster or draining capacity in any way?
This is mostly cleaning up after, let's say, misguided customer attempts to add a lot of capacity at once,
Mm-hmm.
where the
Okay.
cluster is simply thrashing and there is no visible progress, or the cluster is wasting time on something that it shouldn't do.
Okay. Yeah, these are the things that I'm trying to understand, and this is how we would, whether we add this script or we add a new command, we would still need to add testing around it. So this is the exact type of thing that I'm trying to understand, so that we can add proper testing around it. So yeah, I have in my notes known use cases is adding capacity, like a new host or rack. So that seems kind of like what you described, adding a whole lot of capacity, also draining a host, and then changing crush rules or tunables. I don't know exactly. That was just coming from Dan Vanderster. I don't know exactly the details of that. So I don't know if anybody on this call has details about that. Oh yeah, go ahead, Frederick.
Yeah, the general use cases are when you add some hardware to the cluster or you remove the hardware from the cluster, you reweight subtree reweight all those Ds to 001, for example, 0.01. And then that triggers or you change your crush rule on the pool, and that triggers a lot of data movement, and you don't want all PGs moving around at the same time with all objects being misplaced. And would you restart an OSD or so, then some of them might become degraded. And as Alexander said, those PGs might not be recovered before some other PGs have the time to, and they're backfilling. So even though I thought that was some priority given to the degraded objects and degraded PGs for being recovered before the others get backfilled. But yeah, so that's different use cases for which the upmap-remap balancer that aligns the upset with the acting set is precious. So yeah, yes, I guess for the testing, those are three of the different. I mean, at least two of the different things that we could try. Like when adding some OSDs, removing some, putting some OSDs in or out, rebalancing, check that all PGs become active clean, and then yeah.
Okay, I see. Thank you. And then my understanding too is that we don't really see this happen on, or I guess it depends, but we don't really see this happen on smaller clusters, right? We would see it on, or at least in a cluster where you're adding a lot. It would take not just adding a little bit of capacity, you're adding a lot of capacity in order to trigger these cases.
Yeah, I would say it depends on how many. I mean, the percentage of OSDs that you're adding to a failout domain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's
And
what I'll need to work out when I'm researching. I'm, uh, yeah, I'm looking how to recreate it, because what us developers have is the vstart cluster, but that is a not great to work with in those kinds of operations, because it's not managed by Ceph ADM or anything. So I might have to rely on, we have tests in Toothology that operate clusters with Ceph ADM. So there's ways, but
okay.
you just have to go into it knowing exactly what you want to do, that kind of thing. So very helpful to understand from you guys.
Yeah. Sure.
Cool. And then yeah, so in addition, I know Alexander, you were talking about again going back to adding the like an undo command as opposed to supporting the script. I really want to get to the bottom of like why that's better option. I'm not saying it's not, but I really want to get to the bottom of it. So we're going in the right. I want to make sure we're going in the right direction, with it. So what are the advantages to adding a Ceph command as opposed to just supporting the script?
Well, the script is. I'm talking about the fact that a built-in command looks more official, and it doesn't add a supply chain risk, so that we have one vendor Ceph instead of two vendors Ceph plus the author of the script.
Okay, yeah, I do see. I mean, yeah, the idea would be to, right now it's like the supply chain problem, but the idea with adding the script is to um, add official support, and then we also have the community member adding to it as well. But yeah, I think we would need to look into the scope. I wouldn't imagine it would be too crazy, too much to add the command. But I'll include that in my research and look into the scope of that for sure.
Yeah, I think
it might actually
Dan
put
had in
us.
mind. Yeah, I think what Dan had in mind is to have a better balancer, more clever balancer out of the box that would help with those scenarios when we add hardware. So that it has less impact on client's I/O when we add a bunch of more servers in the cluster. Yeah. Without knowing how this works, or without having to pay attention to how it works. I mean, like power users like Alexander or many of other power users know how to deal with those situations, and they are used to those situations running hardware, for example. But there are some new users that might not understand why the cluster has so many misplaced objects and possibly degraded objects when they restart some OSDs during those backfilling operations, and getting a bit worried about that. So also having all PGs getting active, clean, and the cluster, well, the cluster was still helpful good, I think, even with misplaced PGs, but it's like a relief when you see that on Ceph status.
Sure.
So yes, that would also possibly help users, newbies, getting more confidence in Ceph, probably.
Definitely. Yeah, that's why we want to prioritize this for Umbrella for sure.
Can I just piggyback on this last comment by Frederick? So
Sure.
I was rereading actually your tracker about incorporating upmap-remapped or pgremapper in the balancer module. Actually, yeah, I think that one of the things that the balancer is actually missing is that this is reported in the tracker. It's like not honoring the begin time and end time. I mean, it is true that outside this window, it doesn't do any active work to balance PGs out, but it is also true that whatever is misplaced, it stays as such. So eventually in operations here, we have found ourselves pretty much abusing the begin time and end time to make sure that at least once per day, the cluster goes back to health okay with no data movement and no misplaced PGs at all, to basically have the mons trimming the OSD maps. Because if you have a balancing operation that goes on and on and on for probably days, if you're like cycling capacity or expanding your cluster with new hardware, there is a ton of PGs that go misplaced, and health stays okay because actually nothing is degraded, but the mons are not trimming the OSD maps, and so this is a bit of a pile up. and dependently on when you run your mons, this can actually fill up the file system partition where you have your mon store, which is quite dangerous. So so eventually either we use begin and end time, or we just use upmap-remap. Like, we turn the balancer off, we use upmap-remap to go to 0 misplaced, wait a few minutes for the mons to trim the OSD maps, and then turn on the balancer again to let it do more work. One disadvantage of this is that it's either manual, or if you're using begin and end time and you have a lot of data movement, let's say that the recovery efficiency decreases over time, because over time you will have less and less misplaced objects. So you enter a sort of a long tail mode where backfilling becomes slower and slower, and so you're just wasting a lot of time for nothing, basically, just to trim the OSD maps, which is not ideal. But this is actually something that would require changing a bit the logic of the existing balancer, because in my opinion, this would mean if you're out of the working hours and there are PGs which are misplaced, you should actually upmap-remap them to make the up and the acting sets identical. So it would actually need to take some explicit actions to have 0 misplaced, which is a bit of a slightly bigger change than just having the command to undo the remapping, as Alexander was suggesting.
Yeah.
Enrico, I know that the balancing is, the optimization planes of the balancer goes every 60 seconds by default, every minute, yes.
That's
and
default,
that's not,
yes.
Yeah, and this window time is not enough for the monitors to trim their maps.
No, well, this default time is let's say is the frequency at which the balancer module in the MTI checks whether there's work to do, and then okay, if there is a lot of work to do, like if you have a 10 petabytes cluster and you have a decent amount of PGs which are misplaced, this is taking much longer than that, of course.
Yeah, that's true. Because
Anyway, it usually just notices that there is too much data misplaced and quickly goes back to sleep doing nothing. So I have no real objection to the 1 minute polling period for whether there is work to do, as long as it quickly recognizes that it shouldn't do anything at the moment.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize, all of that scenario that that Enrico described, we do want to address that as well. But if we do everything at once, that'll just be a big undertaking. So that's what I'm trying to do, work out, like what are the things we can do realistically in the first phase of Umbrella. And so we're not introducing too many risky changes at once, and two, just not so we're rushing a feature, but doing it in a way where it's manageable, and and also like giving perhaps users a dry run option at first, and then adding it as default behavior to the balancer. That's what I'm trying to work out, prioritizing those things. But we do want to address that, and so the eventual goal would be to have the balancer behavior auto patched as so that we're not having to so that it does address that outside of beginning and end time, as you were describing.
Yeah, we could have this new logic set to false by default in Umbrella, and so that it gives the time to the one that understand it properly, power users to test it and report, and then we could eventually change to the default to true in future releases.
Yeah, that would be my inclination for sure.
Safest way to do it.
No, yeah, and again, not to say that we don't trust what we're sending out, but that's just a safety training wheels, just the extra insurance because we wouldn't want something. We would want people to be testing it out in the first phase, and it's just a safer option. Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, from what I understand, I have the use cases down as adding a bunch of capacity or even removing a bunch of capacity. Basically, just doing that in a large quantity for triggering that scenario. And then I also have, I'm just summarizing the takeaways. So a good place to start might be adding a new command to an undo command, which is exactly what the upmap-remapped script is doing, so that we can have official support there. And then, of course, in a second phase, or additional phases, we would also want to address the behavior that you guys were describing in the upmap balancer and patching that behavior. But a good place to start would be adding the undo functionality. And we don't care about, or there are no discernible differences from what I can see between upmap-remapped, pgremapper, and JJ's balancer. The core functionality that we want is aligning the up and acting sets, which is what all of those three things share.
The last piece of summary is wrong.
Okay.
So the difference between those scripts in the additional functionality that they provide on top of one of the functions, which is to align, which is to undo, which is to align the up and acting sets. The difference are all about functionality of creating more remapped PGs, not removing remapped PGs.
Right. Yeah. So we're adding up maps to align the up and acting sets, but you're saying that's different between the scripts.
No, that's the common functionality between those scripts.
Okay,
And
that's
this is
what I
not
was
the
getting
primary.
at.
Yeah, this is not even the primary purpose for the pgremapper script, and it is not the primary purpose of the JJ balancer to undo the misplaced PGs. It's just the shared piece of functionality that all three scripts implement with in different code, but with the same end result. And this is also an argument.
And yeah,
This is also
the scripts are doing other things, but the aligning the up and acting sets will address the issue that's described in the feature tracker. This is the main use case that we first want to address.
Yes, it's a useful
like
primitive.
Like you showed me the monitoring in JJ's balancer, which is great, but that's not what we're prioritizing at first. At least that's what I'm getting at. There may be additional functionality that these scripts are doing, but we're not prioritizing that right now.
That's definitely a separate task to be tracked separately, to be implemented separately, and maybe much later.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's it. That's what I was getting at there. All right.
I just have a comment about aligning acting and upsets. I agree that having a command to do that would be helpful for some cases. It is also true that when you have something misplaced, it's because either you have added or removed capacity or because the balancer was doing some work. If you leave the balancer on and you remap the PG mapping, then the balancer would immediately start to do some work again. Therefore, even if your original comment to like remap the PGs and go to zero misplaced works, the balancer would actually fight against you because it would say, oh, but there are things to be balanced out. So maybe you reach zero for a few seconds, but then as soon as the balancer kicks in, it would start again to move around PGs. So that could be a bit counterintuitive.
I
Yes,
see.
and the issue that we are fighting is that a misguided customer did something that resulted, let's say, in 30% of misplaced PGs. So bringing it back to zero and then letting the balancer bring it up to 5 is exactly what we want.
Yeah, I don't think, Enrico, I don't think it would try to put all PGs active clean, I mean, down to zero, but only to max misplaced ratio, like it tries to do, but putting some PGs in the queue, when putting some PGs in the queue, but not more than target max misplaced ratio. This new logic would only reduce down to target max misplaced
Okay,
ratio.
I see.
I think that's what Dan had in mind.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Now it's more clear. Okay. Perfect.
So that would work with the same limit for both.
Right.
More
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that both modes with target zero and the target as configured make sense. So it's a command line option to use.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look. Part of the research will be looking into the best way to go about it. But it sounds like if we do have like a command to align the up and acting sets, there will need to be like something that enforces that you also turn the balancer module off, or at least a warning to say that that's probably a good idea. So I'll look into the best way to do that. But that's a good note to good thing to note for sure. All right, thank you guys. This has been really helpful, and I might have another session as I go further into the project. But this has been really helpful to understand more from the user perspective. Is there anything else that anybody that we didn't cover that anybody wants to add that might be helpful?
I have one thing which is unrelated to this discussion, and maybe it should be another tracker on the Ceph tracker for a new feature. But at some point you were saying dry run, so I was wondering if there are any plans, or if at some point we could get a sort of Ceph OSD crush reweight dry run or reweight subtree dry run, precisely to forecast what's going to happen in your cluster and how many misplaced PGs and objects you're going to have when you're doing like major changes to the crash weight. Because to the best of my knowledge, currently there is no such a thing. So you have the leap of faith. You would basically hit return at some point and see see how much misplaced PGs you would get, and if it's too many, or you realize that you gave the wrong weight to the OSDs or to an entire subtree, you would then go with upmap-remapped and try to fix the situation afterwards. I think it would be very, very interesting for certain comments, at least, that would provoke a huge amount of data to be moved, to have a sort of a prediction.
So
I'm not sure if this was ever raised somewhere.
That's the crush tool that can simulate the data placement, right? But what you're suggesting, I think what would be nice is to have this next Ceph status after the command. Like you run
Correct. Yes.
You run
exactly. That would be ideal. Yeah. Like if you do this, you would actually land in this situation. Yeah. I mean, it is not like as dramatic as, yes, I really, really mean it, because it would not cause any disruption, I would guess. but a dry run to project you where you would get if you actually run the command that you have in mind, I think it would be very helpful. And yes, and the output of like Ceph status, it's ideal. I mean, it's something that everyone looks at and would immediately understand, right?
Yeah, definitely. Create create a feature tracker for that, and add it to the Etherpad. So I like to tag it with the user dev tag, so we know where we can track the progress on it. And I'm not sure when we could that will land in the scope, but that's good to know that that's a something that we want. And it'd be helpful if you could list, like exact commands that you're using to reweight in your cluster, even in a fake scenario, and then what you're seeing currently, and then what you would like to see, that kind of thing.
Yep. Sure. Thanks.
Or crush bucket move.
Also.
For example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. If there is anything about the topic today that you want to add after the meeting, feel free to update the feature ticket, and I'm monitoring that, so that'll be helpful just to continue discussion if needed. I will probably bring this to another user dev session as I go further in the research. And thank you all for all of the insights today. It's been really helpful.
Sure. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura, for organizing.
Yeah.
Thanks for attending.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye.